One of the things that Yinka said there was that the fruit is deeply related to evangelism and to mission. And for us, mission isn't just going and telling people about Jesus. It is absolutely that, but it is much wider than that. And one of the key things that we understand God's calling on us as humans to be is to care well for our creation, and to be on mission with God is to care for creation. And we are privileged in our church to have Joel and Esther Chaney, who run an organization called CreativEnergie. They're going to come and tell us a bit about CreativEnergie, and then we're going to hear a bit about what God's been doing in their lives. So Joel and Esther, over to you.
It's a real privilege to be able to kind of share with you today. And I just want to welcome some of our team from CreativEnergie here. I don't know if you could stand up quickly, actually. It'd be wonderful if you could. There's Craig, David, we've got Chris and Z, who's actually the one behind the films. Yeah, we just want to have a chat with them later. And they'll be able to share with you much more. They're the kind of the energy behind a lot of the work that we do here, and I'm really thankful to have them with us this weekend. Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I was having lunch with someone, and they were telling me about some of people in senior positions in the oil industry. And they used to think they were the bee's knees, that they were building the economy, creating jobs for lots of people. But now they were saying their sons and daughters were coming home to them and telling them that they're the ones who had destroyed their future. And they were having an identity crisis, and that they were no longer the heroes. And I couldn't help asking, like, who is going to love them? And there are many young people today experiencing what's becoming known as climate change anxiety. In fact, personally, it hit me when we visited Edinburgh Zoo as a family not long ago. And we're walking around the exhibits and reading some of the information signs. And it hit me how much of the great wildernesses of the earth are being destroyed. And in the last 20 years, on our watch. And there are many climate change scientists and researchers who are having mental breakdowns, actually, deliberating things that people have told me about. And it's not just them, but parents asking, how do I talk to my kids about this? And grandparents worried about their children's future. It's young kids asking, Daddy, are we winning the war on climate change? You see, climate change anxiety is a real thing. And then if you've read books, which I was reading at the moment, called The Uninhabitable Earth, you can often feel overwhelmed, almost helpless. But today, I want to point you back to Jesus, because we are a people of hope. And hope in the Bible is a confident expectation of what God has promised in his faithfulness. And we know that he has the strength to carry it out. And this hope is rooted in the God who created the planet and sustains it. You see, as the people of God, we know something of the future that God has planned. And it's not one of despair. It's one of redemption and restoration. It's one of shalom. For me, acting out of panic is not sustainable. So as God's people, I believe we need to act out of love. Now, I felt today, I just wanted to read a small part of Nehemiah, partly because it's, I guess, some of what sprang to be CreativEnergie, and partly because I think it gives some insights into how, as the people of God, we can respond as people of hope. I'm just going to just highlight a few things. So Nehemiah at the start, there's Hananiah and some of his brothers come back, and they report the remnant here in the province who have survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, its gates are destroyed by fire. And Nehemiah starts, this is how he responds, right? So as soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I can't help doing this sometimes about the climate. And I said, "O Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Let your ears be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which have sinned against you. Even my father's house has sinned, and we have acted very corruptly against you, and have not kept the commandments, the statutes and the rules which you commanded your servant Moses." See, he comes to God in prayer. He comes to God in repentance. But he always, you see it through the whole book, he always prays with hope and not despair. He's not hopeless at the situation. He says, God keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keeps his commandments, and he knows that God is alive and cares. So let's join Nehemiah and come to God in repentance about how we've treated, created, unknowingly a lot of the time. And let's come in with longing prayer. And I do challenge you as a church to come together to pray about this specific issue. And not as people who have no hope, but people who have hope in the steadfast love of God. And the thing I love about Nehemiah is his prayer unfolds into courage. And he acts with what God has put on his heart. He brings people together. He tells them, "You see the trouble that we are in?" And they responded, "Let us rise up and build." And he adds, so they strengthen their hands for the good work. So brothers and sisters, this is a time for the church to come together, to rise up and build, to strengthen our hands for the good work. Now, so CreativEnergie, the organization I'm part of, has come out of this desire to respond in hope, to support the church, to love the poor. And our particular focus is energy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that now. So we're going to watch a short video to kind of introduce you to something of what our heart is.
Here at CreativEnergie, we're passionate about unlocking sustainable energy for abundant life. It can be so easy to take energy for granted, but around the world, almost 1 in 10 people have no access to electricity at all. But it's vital, however, not just to provide access to energy, but to ensure that it's clean and sustainable energy. The Earth's natural patterns of climate change have been accelerated by the rapid industrial growth of modern society, and today we are experiencing firsthand more and more the effects of rising sea levels, extreme weather, increased flooding, and the destruction of fragile ecosystems.
But what about some of the lesser known costs of burning fossil fuels? Over 3 billion people, that's almost half the planet's population, have no access to clean cooking fuels. Instead, they usually burn smoky fuels like coal or firewood to cook their meals. This contributes to over 4 million deaths a year attributed to indoor air pollution. That's more than malaria and HIV combined, and equal to the number of lives claimed by COVID in the first 18 months of the global pandemic. Yet, indoor air pollution claims 4 million lives every year, and it is a pattern that isn't changing.
Our vision at CreativEnergie is that all people have access to sustainable energy for abundant life. As followers of Jesus, we partner with organisations and churches to collaboratively develop and disseminate innovative solutions that enable sustainable stewardship of creation, catalyse change in communities, and unlock sustainable energy for abundant life. These commitments form the foundation of all our projects, whether it be biogas in Tanzania and Kenya, solar energy hubs in Ghana and Malawi, or community energy sharing in Uganda.
At CreativEnergie, we don't just want to airdrop solutions for the short term. We believe that true abundance comes about when we work in partnership with communities for the long haul. Over the years, it has been our greatest pleasure to see friends around the world flourishing, businesses expanding, lives being transformed, relationships being made stronger, and neighbours doing their utmost to lift each other up. And this, in the end, is what unlocking sustainable energy for abundant life is all about.
That memories of being like with the Maasai tribe there, and actually just because a lot of the stories we often don't know about. And then when Z was there last time, we travelled around and we visited some different places and kind of discovered some of the stories of things that had happened, and discovered the biogas being disseminated among the Maasai, which we'd never expected, and it was just remarkable. So energy, Glenn asked me to talk a little bit about energy. So energy touches all of our life. I just want to quickly highlight 3 areas, and I'm going to share a few stories. Right, so when we buy a new product, whatever it is, it's often manufactured. Like take the humble pencil. You've got it's made out the internal bit's made out of graphite, clay, and water. The graphite has to be ground down using some sort of motor machine. It's baked in a kiln to make it, and then you've got the machines that actually make the wood on the outside. Almost every product, and that's such a really simple product. Think about a car, or think about your phone. I mean, every single electronic component in there is made, right? And it's everywhere. And so my point is, like, there's a considerable amount of energy that goes into products that is unseen for most of us. And then food, like there's huge amounts of energy in the agricultural food supply chain, right? About 30% of the world's energy, 30% of the world energy is goes into making food. Like that's fertilizer production, transportation, agriculture, processing, handling, a lot of other stuff. Some foods, yeah, we know are relatively efficient, like wheat and beans and nuts and others. And then others use more land and water. Things like beef is particularly bad, and lamb and goats, which emit 20 times more greenhouse emissions than plant-based protein things. So, and then our homes, you know, how we heat and cool our homes. And even, we might not think about it, the building materials that we use to make them. Like if you're building an extension, what you choose to make your house out of has an impact, right? Those materials have to be mined and manufactured and processed and transported. Our whole world is linked, is kind of run on energy in some ways. And energy is linked directly to carbon emissions. It seems a bit simple, I'm just going to say it, but because our society, our economy in the UK, it relies heavily on fossil fuel to generate the energy, to make all this stuff that we buy, to transport all this food to our shops, you know, to package all this stuff in plastic. And so solving and all of that emits stuff into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And so solving the energy challenge is so critical to solving the sustainability challenge, right? And that's why CreativEnergie exists, really. I wanted to share 3 stories about energy. The first one is relating to some work we've been doing. So a lot of innovation, right, is focused on people who have access to electricity and who have money, who can pay for devices. But what if you don't have money? And what actually, if you're not like the big market where people want to sell you things? And one of the things that COVID has highlighted is access to oxygen, right? But the problem is, you need energy to make oxygen. And so if you're on off-grid in a rural energy clinic, in a rural clinic in Africa, and there are a lot of these, and you don't have access to electricity, you can't generate oxygen in these clinics. That's a problem. And the problem with existing oxygen concentrators, which are currently shipped to kind of clinics like this, is even if you can get it to work on some solar panels and they use a considerable amount of energy, how are you going to get through the night? Because they use so much energy, like you need this mega battery bank that quite literally it costs about £20,000 to get you through the night. So energy is absolutely critical. And so we've been working on how do we generate oxygen using considerably less energy. Because if we can do it using considerably less energy, then it means we can actually give access to more people. And it's not just about oxygen. Oxygen is one thing. It's all the devices we own. If we can reduce, product designers can make devices using less energy, then it actually gives access to more people and it emits less carbon dioxide. This is important. And it matters then, doesn't it, how we insulate our homes? It matters. These things matter. I've got into the habit, when we buying, if I get some new clothes or whatever, or trying to get them from charity shops or whatever, but if I have to get something new, of doing research into the company and looking at what water they consume and even writing to the companies and saying, what are you doing? Because if we don't ask as consumers, then how are they going to know that we care? I know it probably infuriates Esther sometimes, and it takes me forever to buy a pair of jeans. But I think it's important, that we speak out. And I want to talk to another story. Now this one's take you to Mongolia. I had the privilege of traveling to Ulaanbaatar. It's a city in Mongolia with a guy called Ben Withers. He's a waste management consultant who's got a real heart for mission. And Ulaanbaatar is an interesting city. It's very polluted, but they haven't got a waste management system. They don't have waste collection. And one of the initiatives that Ben's been involved setting up something called the Bethel Center, which is a center for rehabilitating alcoholics which don't have a home. It's wonderful work. They've been starting some projects around waste recycling and initiatives, and they've been collecting waste from the local hotels, and I went with them to see some of these things and sorting that and actually looking at ways they can recycle that from making fuel briquettes through to actually now exploring more viable ways of doing plastic recycling. And there's amazing projects going on. These projects this whole organization called movement almost called Precious Plastics, who's making plastic recycling possible in these places, who's making the machines open source to be able to do this. We can have hope that there's amazing stuff going on, and not just because this is going on, not just because there's technical solutions out there. We can have hope. We can have hope that this project in Mongolia is a project of the church, really. This is environmental missions, right? That they're bringing hope and a future and employment to people who are recovering from alcoholism. And they're sharing Jesus with them. And people are becoming followers of Jesus. And people's lives are being transformed. I found the whole thing very moving. You see, the church has a message of hope. This is environmental missions where we're bringing together, sharing the good news through addressing environmental needs, as medical missions brings the gospel through providing medicines and treatments, right? And Ben shared with me about his personal mission to go zero waste, right? And he was telling me about other people, like someone he knew who literally was producing, and this is honestly no exaggeration, a bag of rubbish a year, right? And you were like, how on earth do they do that? How is that possible? But people do it, right? He was telling me how they do it, and you can read about it online. You can go read about this. I can send some links. And when I was at university, and I know this is possible from personal experience, because when I was at university, I had a housemate called Andy, right? And he came home to me one day, and he said, I think we should live without plastics. I was like, how are we going to do that? He was like, do you want to take up the challenge? No plastics are going to come into this house for a month, at least. It's like, okay. But then we went through this journey of how do we live without plastics? Like, we can't buy these things from the supermarket anymore because they're wrapped in plastic. We can't get these things. We can't even get bread. We can't even get milk. It's like it's something we're rediscovering the milkman and various things. It was an interesting journey to just be so, yeah. It was difficult, but it was interesting as well, and we learned a lot. And then we were out running in the Peak District one day, and he said, look, we're doing the plastic thing, but now we've got to. What we want to do now is, I think we need to deal with our food waste. I was like, yeah, you're right. What do you think? He said, we should get some worms. So we were there, literally, in the Peak District, and he started digging for worms in the ground. And he got these worms, like, literally, and we were running back with this plastic full of bucket with worms in, and we went home and we set up this wormery at home in the garden, and we were putting our food in there, and we were getting the juice you get out, whatever it is, the liquid, and then we were growing tomato plants on the windowsills and all sorts. And so that this kind of was maybe my first entry into what creation care was. Andy was passionate about this. And he was the one, just saying, we can do this, and we've got to be serious about it. And one story closer to home, right? So Mark and Yiming, you may well know them. They live in King's Road in Portobello. We used to live there. They were our neighbours, and they noticed how much litter there was on King's Road, right? And they started picking litter once a month, and they invited neighbours to join them, and other church members. And they started to get a bit of a community going. I think they're still doing it. And Belle in our church, she was really involved in a community garden in Portobello. And that's kind of how we got to know Belle and Dan. This is a form of environmental mission, and it's local. Getting alongside people with space, in this space is just so important. Just finally, so have you ever wondered, right? Have you ever wondered if the changes you make will make any difference at all? Have you ever thought, well, what's the point, right? Well, if I eat less meat or take fewer flights or whatever, actually, it turns out it's not just you. Some research has shown, for example, that an online survey with thousands of respondents showed that someone, people who knew someone who'd given up flying because of climate change, half of them said they flew less as a result. So your witness, if you make a statement not to have a car or to stop flying, that starts to actually impact other people. Community organisers in this particular survey were trying to get people to install solar panels, and they were 62% apparently more successful in their efforts if they had panels on their house as well. Right? People look at you, and our efforts to live boldly as people who care for God's world is going to have a significant impact if we're living that story. And so I want to challenge you today. What are the spiritual and environmental needs here in Portobello? How can the church come together in prayer and action? How can I felt challenged actually listening to Ruth Valerio's talk and some of the things from the canopy this morning to catch up with it. How can we create spaces to journey as a community on this? Whether it's how can we create spaces to have conversations about this and figure it out together? We don't have to have all of the answers. Figure it out with the community. Maybe are there ways we can do this together with Portobello? This is an issue that people here in Portobello care about, right? Is there litter to be picked? Is there overgrown areas to be cultivated? Are there gardens to be planted? Are there ecosystems to be protected? Are there trees to be planted? Are there things in your work where you need to be speaking out? Are there things is your home there to be insulated? There are things that we can do, right? Because we believe that the church is God's plan, right? And has a crucial role in this. As churches and Christians in the UK, around the world, we might have been called for such a time as this, to pull together as a church. Together we can live prophetically, serve our communities, and speak for climate justice, pray in the Holy Spirit, and show that another way is possible. I was talking to somebody at Tear Fund recently, and I said, the work we're doing is quite niche, right? And he said it's a big niche. He said, actually, it's the biggest niche in the world. You see, the church is the largest community organization on the planet. And if we come together in unity and the power of the Holy Spirit, we can not only play a crucial role, but I believe that we can play a pivotal role. So let's strengthen ourselves for the good work, right? So will you join with me? Will you join with CreativEnergie? Will you join together as a church to do this? And I'm going to try and send some stuff out to on the newsletter with Glenn in a week or so that might encourage you and help you in this journey. So that's what I wanted to share with you this morning. Thanks for